The energy debate has rather disappeared from our front pages. The sun is shining, the temperature is rising, the price of gas is not alarming people particularly, and we're told our household bills will come down to manageable levels. Well, Clive Moffatt, former government energy advisor and somebody that talks about energy and energy security, has been pretty busy over the last couple of weeks behind the scenes, talking to members of Parliament, talking to National Grid. And Clive, there is a consensus view now. It's there. There's almost no dispute, really, a few MPs here and there. But basically, it's the rush to net zero. Labour, by the looks of what Keir Starmer has said, going to stop all future North Sea gas and oil development, going to quadruple, or at least quadruple the number of wind farms, onshore, offshore, etc. What have you been saying to these MPs over the last few weeks?
What I've been saying is that there's a need for balance. And I think the time has come, people are beginning to realise that there's a huge cost involved in this. And there's a huge amount of disruption involved in this. And that there are technical reasons, as well as there being overriding cost implications of going forward, as they are promising. We've got a situation at the moment where politicians from both parties are playing politics in the dark on this issue of net zero. Basically, we're making promises like closing down gas on the electricity system by 2030 or 2035. By basically quadrupling, as you say, on wind farms, increasing nuclear reactors, basically, and all of that is coming out as promises that we will do this. But there's no cost-benefit analysis. And what I'm finding interesting, people I'm talking to who have been in the industry as long as I have, is they say there is no cost-benefit analysis being done. We haven't seen a proper full assessment of all of this put together. So we're in a situation where we've got a lot of these issues are uncertain, and there's no balance involved. There's no idea about how we're going to underpin security in this so-called transition, which could take a long time.
Yes, I mean, the talk of nuclear, fine, expensive, but, these small energy reactors, but that's 10 years away, 12 years away. We know that wind, when it works perfectly, is great, but very often, because of its intermittency, there is a major problem. And the Labour proposals. I mean, all of this leaves us ever more dependent, does it not, on imports to stop the lights going out?
Yeah. I think we've got an interesting situation as well. Just like to add is that in the process, what's happened is rather interesting. Since we last spoke, Grid and Ofgem have come out of well, I won't say they've come out of the closet as such, but they actually come out and said, we have got problems with this. And this is the first time that they've openly admitted. Ofgem have come out and said there isn't going to be enough battery storage power to counter intermittency on wind.
Right.
And Grid have come out and said it's going to cost billions. Pettigrew has gone public and said upgrading the grid to take gas out of the electricity system altogether will cost billions. In fact, there's a report going around, I heard on the grapevine, done by grid engineers, which say that the overall cost of upgrading the network for net zero could be £3 trillion.
What? Which
is £110,000 per household, which is bigger than the total size of the UK national debt.
But if this is being discussed, and if National Grid and the energy regulator are openly talking about these things, why, apart from this programme, is no one talking about it?
Well, on the political side, message I'm getting back from MPs from both sides is that Labour is saying we adamantly support what we're saying and we're going to take drastic action to implement net zero. On the Conservative side, you get ambivalence. There is a group of MPs there who say, well, maybe we should just hold back. We should think about the scale of this. We should look at the costs and be a bit more balanced in our approach. As one MP said to me, put energy policy on a realistic footing. But there is still a fear that if they do anything that could be construed as backtracking on the 2050 target, that they would basically lose political votes in what is coming up in a year's time in the general election. I have said to APPG members that I think my view is that voters would welcome a view which said we need to take 3 or 4 measures, and I'll tell you what they are now. There are 5 measures I want to take, which are relatively straightforward, which would be an investment in underpinning security and affordability. Gas and power and the economy are inextricably linked, and they're going to continue to be so for the foreseeable future. We basically need to review the windfall tax. We need to get more gas and oil out of the North Sea, reduce our dependency on imports. We need to increase our storage levels, which I've said before many times. We need to, that takes time. That takes 5 years to build. We need to actually, in the meantime, put in place a formal system for industrial voluntarily curtailing demand at times of system stress, which will put the operator in responsibility for real-time management. When I mentioned this to Grid, they said, we'd be happy to do that, but no politicians ever told us to do it. And the other thing is we need to stop, on the gas side, we need to stop the deadline on the boilers, on heat pumps, because basically it's not going to happen. And I think as a general principle, consumers, Nigel, should be allowed to choose if and when they want to adapt, and if they can afford to adapt, to the electrification of both heat and transport.
That is one of the most comprehensive and powerful arguments I've ever heard as to what we need to do against this delusion, and it is a complete delusion that has swept our political class. As you say, no cost-benefit analysis, potential costs, eye-watering potential costs of moving the whole of Grid over. And there's an open invitation here. If anybody at any level of authority in the Labour, Conservative, or indeed Liberal Democrat parties wants to come on this programme and argue against the 5 big points that Clive Moffatt has made, please do. There's an open-door invitation any time you want to come. Clive, I'm horrified. I'm horrified that this stuff is not being more openly debated, and you coming on tonight helps with that process. We're going to make sure, we're going to start writing letters and asking questions.
Just to let you know, one little number that might be interesting to viewers is that the cost of balancing the market in electricity, because we're so short of flexible insurance, we don't have enough insurable capacity and support, has got to a point where we're importing, say, electricity from Belgium with £1,000 a megawatt hour, and the costs of that balancing process in the short term is now nearly 30% of the wholesale electricity price and will continue to rise. Steps have to be taken. You cannot allow a grid in a country as important, as an economy as big as this, to go on air and say, we think that involuntary blackouts or voluntary blackouts should be a norm during a cold winter.
The whole thing is beyond belief. Clive, brilliant. Thank you for coming in. And you've certainly re-energised me to start talking a bit more again about energy. I promise you have.
Even though the sun's shining.
Even though the sun's shining, and even though, right at the minute, the price of natural gas is back to sane-ish levels.